are looking out, and all you see is ruins.
Juanita.
You just see ruins of an old church. That's true, but it's more than that. This was called the double church, because look how long it is. And there's another one all the way back, and there's a huge baptismal font back there as well. This was a magnificent double church, it's called, but its primary name was the Church of the Virgin Mary, because Mary was in Ephesus. And when they named a church in the olden times, in the first centuries, they only named it after someone who had been in that area, who had lived there. Like a saint had died there or had lived there. Because Mary was here, when the Third Ecumenical Council met, they met here specifically because Mary was here and they were going to address the issue of who she was. So this is in 431. The Third Ecumenical Council of the Catholic Church took place right here where you're sitting. Can you imagine bishops from all over Asia Minor and all over Europe? They all came here to meet, to discuss, among the many things, who Mary was. But when you define who Mary is, that's not the primary thing the church is concerned about. Mary is not primary. Jesus is primary. And when you make dogmas and doctrines about Mary, they are primarily about Jesus. That's what they're primarily about. The Marian dogmas are like the moat around a castle. They protect the king. If you have a moat and you're trying to negotiate, and some of those that saw my movie on Mary, I was trying to climb up if you are in a moat and the king is up there and there's water down between, or it's a big moat, there's no way you could get to the king. The moat protects the king inside. The Marian dogmas are like that. They protect who her son is. For example, there was debates going on for the first 3 or 4, actually the first 5 centuries, over who and what was this Yeshua guy. Some said he was man. Some said he was God. Some said he was some kind of an amorphous mixture of the two, like oil and water. You shake it up and it's kind of mixed together, God and man. And then some said that when he died on the cross, it was just a man and the Spirit of Christ left him. Others said that it was any kind of, I'm not even going to go into all the different ones, all kinds of mixtures and ideas, and heresy swirled around like crazy. And the councils of the Catholic Church over the first 5 centuries hammered out the doctrines of the Trinity and the two natures of Christ, oftentimes with their fists, believe it or not. There were councils where they're actually fist fighting. I think it happened here. Some of they'd form 2 sides. One would say one and the other, and they would fist fight. But I love that passion. I wish we would see more of that kind of thing today. But the question was, who is Jesus? Is he God or is he man? And in this council, there was Nestorius and Cyril. Nestorius had a twisted view of who Jesus was, kind of a mixture of God and divine. And Cyril was straight as an arrow. And he was fighting, and they even excommunicated each other. And there was a huge confrontation going on here. But in the end, the council of the church declared that Mary was the Mother of God. And the Greek word was Theotokos. Theo means God, Tokos means bearer, the one who bore God. Now, when I was a Protestant, I could not say the Mother of God. My mother will not say it to this day, because she said Mary cannot be the mother of God. She's the mother of Jesus. What do we mean when we say Mary's the mother of God? Did she give birth to the Trinity? No. Did she pre-exist the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit? Of course not. She's a creature. She is not angelic. She's not divine. She's not part divine. She is a human girl. Period. And she was chosen by God to bring his son into the world. If Jesus is 100% man, as we know he is, and he is 100% divine, as we know he is. He has 2 natures, human, divine, but he is only one person. He's not a divine person and a human person. He is a divine nature, and he has a human nature, but he is only one person. And it is not a human person, he is a divine person. If Jesus is God in the flesh, a divine person, then Mary gave birth to who? The divine person who is God. She is his mother. What the church did was they made this almost as a litmus test. We could ferret out the heretics. We will give you all a test. If you cannot say Mother of God, then you are either denying the humanity of Christ or the divinity of Christ, and on either case you're a heretic. If you can say Mary is the Mother of God, knowing that she's 100% a human girl, she gave birth probably at 15 years old, gave birth to this baby, He was a human baby. He cried. He filled his little nappy diapers. He had to breastfeed. He got a cold. He lived like we did. He was a normal baby. But also, that baby was a divine person. He was God in the flesh. And some people say he didn't know he was God until he was baptized and the Holy Spirit came down and he says, oh, so that's who I am. That's a bunch of rubbish. I love the way our priest says it. That baby, when he was in the crib, he kept the universe spinning with his little finger and no one even knew it was him what he was doing. He was a divine second person of the Trinity. So he is a man and he is God. So Mary is the mother. That means he's a human of God. That means he's divine. So in that simple phrase, mother of God, you say that he is both man and God. And what is the vehicle for saying that? His mother, Mary. Mary is the definition of who her son is. And that is what was decided right here at this council. And the church was named the Church of the Blessed Virgin Mary because Mary had been here. Now, very quickly, a little history of the end of her life, because I know we got to get to lunch. We're running on a schedule. Oh, by the wall. See, by the way, not by the wall. By the wall. Wall. See, Pope Paul VI was here in 1967. You see the numbers right there. Mary was here in Ephesus, and many claim in Ephesus that she was assumed from heaven here. But the oldest tradition, and the reasonable one, is that she went up from Jerusalem. So a little quick thing. We already talked a number of times about Mary being at the foot of the cross. She had no other sons, so Jesus had to give John to be her son because she did not have another son. And John took care of her. He moved into her home, and I like the way it was said earlier, even became part of, it was like he became part of his, it says in the scriptures. Very, very interesting way it's put. And then when John came here to be in Ephesus, we're going to go to the church next after lunch, the Church of St. John, which is the tomb of St. John the Apostle. He was here for many years as a bishop. He had all of the churches around. He was a bishop. And when we go up there, we're going to talk about what he celebrated and what he did there in the middle of that church. But John, at a certain point, and this is the way I think it happened and the way I present in my movie, around 49 AD, which took place in Acts chapter 50, the apostles all came back together in Jerusalem, and there they had a council. It's really the first ecumenical council because all the apostles came, and they were making a decision for the church. It was a universal decree for all the churches, especially regarding the Gentile churches that had just begun to be forming, and there was a lot of problems because the Jewish Christians were saying to the Gentiles, you cannot be a Christian until you have the flint knife. Here, you guys, you Gentiles, you want to be Christians? Here, you go around the back of this building, take the flint knife, cut it off, and then come back, and we'll let you celebrate with us. Otherwise, you can't do this. And they had this council, and Peter stood up, and he made the basic theological determination. James then stood up, quoted Peter and another prophet. Interesting, isn't it? The two people that James, who is now the bishop of Jerusalem, because Peter had gone onwards, God had called him to do other things, so James, the brother of the Lord, was the bishop there. And Peter, and he, when he's making the pastoral decision, Peter has given the theological foundation that the Gentiles can be saved by faith, not by circumcision. And then James quotes Peter and the the prophet Joel. Two source of authority equivalent. An apostle, the words of Peter, and the prophet from the Old Testament. And then James makes a conclusion. We will not impose circumcision upon the Gentiles. And all the Gentiles go, whew, because it was a big hindrance to evangelization, I'll tell you that. Well, yeah, you can imagine. And so now they're going to send, he says, the Holy Spirit and us make this determination. Think of the arrogance of that. If it is not the Holy Spirit, that is a certain arrogance, but it's not arrogance because it's the truth. They are the magisterium of the church, and the Holy Spirit is working with them and gives them the authority to make a infallible decision, and they make a decision based on what we and the Holy Spirit decide this. And then they write a decree, and Paul becomes Peter's servant boy. For those who say that Paul was an independent Baptist preacher going out like the Lone Ranger to start his own independent Baptist churches, he was not. He understood the authority of the church, and Mark did a beautiful job the other night on the ship explaining that. But Paul, they write a decree, and guess what the Greek word for decree is? They're writing out the rules that all of the churches have to obey. They're giving them new truth. They're defining the truth, and they're giving them this information. And guess what they call it? In the Greek word, it is dogma. It's a dogma. They say in the English it's a decree, but they were sent out with the dogma, and Paul was the mission boy, the messenger boy for the Council of Jerusalem, because they gave him the letter with Barnabas and said, go out to all those churches and read this dogma. Read this decree. So anyway, Mary came back with John from here, I think in 49 AD for that first council, and she went back with John. She would have been about 70 years old, and I think at that point Mary chose to die. She wasn't subject to death, and it was in the Hagia Sophia, on the Hagia. It's the Church of the Dormition. It's a Hagia Dor. It's another name also. No, it's Hagia Zion, and it's on the top of Mount Zion, Holy Zion, and the Church of the Dormition, where Mary fell asleep. And the tradition goes that she was taken down into the Kidron Valley, where she was buried in a church called the Church, the Tomb of Mary. It's there today. You can go down and see it. And the second name of that church is the Church of the Assumption, because the apostles came back later to help put more dressings on her and so on for death, and she wasn't there. She had been risen from and taken up into heaven. And then we have Book of Revelation. We heard it at Mass today. I looked into the heavens and I saw the woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. Who in the world is that? That's the Blessed Virgin Mary. Well, scholars say, oh, no, she's symbolic. She only represents the church of the people of Israel, that the church comes out of the nation of Israel, or out of the church is all this coming. Of course it's symbolic. John writes on many levels, but primarily it is literally Mary, who is the Queen of Heaven. And I think I know why God gave that revelation to John. Because imagine John has taken care of Jesus' mother for all of these years, lived in his house, took good care of him. I bet he was a very saintly man. He had to be very careful what he said, how he conducted himself. And in the end, she's gone, and John looks around and he wonders, John doesn't know everything. And all of a sudden he sees this revelation, and there's Mary. And I think it was Jesus' way of saying, John, here she is. Just thought you'd like to know where she is. You want to see Mom. Thanks, John, for taking good care of Mom for me. You did good, John. Thank you. And then here at the council, we declare that Mary is the Mother of God, and it puts everything in perspective. Jesus is both God and man. Mary is the Mother of God and holds a very privileged position. And for me, being a Protestant, coming over to being Catholic, one of the things that helped me to understand Mary as the Queen of Heaven was what you had mentioned yesterday, Father, about Mary always being on the right hand of Jesus. So when you see in the Orthodox churches, there's Jesus, the icon, and on his left is Mary. But if you turn it this way, Mary is on the right hand of Jesus. Because in 1 Kings chapter 2:19, the king of Israel, Solomon, stood up when his mother walked in the room. And first of all, a woman nobody walks into the throne room of the king unless you are summoned. Only people that are summoned can come in. I loved giving this talk in London, England, because I said, what would happen if someone just walked into the throne room of Queen Elizabeth and they all went, you don't walk in. But she walked in. Solomon got up off his throne. He prostrated himself on the ground, and then he set up a throne at his right hand. No longer one throne in the king of Israel, there are now two. And his mother ruled at his right hand. And the queen mothers from that point on, the king always had a queen. It was never his wife. It was always his mother. And she had the name Gabora, the great lady, the queen mother. Do a search in the Old Testament. Every time a king is mentioned as a new king, it mentions who his mother was. And if Jesus is the quintessential king of Israel, the best and by far outshines Solomon, do you think he would do anything less for his mother than Solomon did for his? He seats his mother at his right hand. She becomes like the queens of the Old Testament, an intercessor for the people, and she rules with her son. She is still human. She's not divine or angelic. She's still human. But that's the beauty of this. The whole means of the incarnation, the whole purpose of Jesus becoming flesh, like it says in the Easter Vigil, and I'll close with this. It says, oh, happy fault of Adam, that because of Adam's sin, God had to become man so that we men could become God. We don't become him, but we take on the divine nature, Peter says, that we are partakers of the divine nature. He brings us right up into his very nature. And when we get there, who do we see? Mary, the Queen of Heaven, sitting at the right hand of her Son in all of eternity. And so that's why I, as a Catholic, came to understand who Mary is and what she is, and why I love everything about her that the Catholic Church teaches now. Be proud to be Catholic. Be proud of what we learn in this place right here. Mary's the Mother of God. God bless us. Let's go have lunch.